have to think about.
Although I do, although I'm also curious about your thoughts on that clip if you remember it. I know it was many hours ago now, but you had sent me that clip
The clip.
that the clip footnotes to Plato talking about
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. He was talking about like anthroposophy and
I
um
didn't finish that actually because I think we went out to get wood at around 11. Like it was just shortly after
yeah.
I
Do you
did my more
remember?
stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I'm not like I mean if you're wherever you want to go with it, if you want to talk about reincarnation or you want to talk about that or anything else, I don't really have a particular.
Yeah, just remind me now. I mean, they were talking about Steiner. It was good. Um, Hearing a little bit about what motivated him. He was really trying to do the embody thing, right? Um, take it out of the headspace and put it into the
Yeah,
body.
even like referred to those higher members as bodies in a sense, right? Sorry, I'm trying to get my shoe off. Um, the like he would say like the astral body and the I think he had actually more members above like those four. I don't know all the details about that, but like he conceptualized the body as having these various members that include kind of the spiritual
Yeah,
intellectual planes or whatever. So he was,
yeah.
I guess you could say that, like, yeah, that's even that his body. Hold up, my mother's calling me real quick.
Sorry.
All good.
I always get a little frustrated when people want to use their own lingo for things that I'm familiar with, but I don't know them in their language, like astral, etheric, like
Hmm.
I have my own conception of those things, but then I have to remember what their meanings are, their meanings. Like this was a problem I had when I first started listening to Jonathan Pageau, because I thought, because he was using all this language that I didn't have. And I kept thinking, I don't get what he's talking about. I really don't understand. Every time you try to wrap your head around a new philosopher, you got to learn all their freaking lingo, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah,
It's, oh my
yeah, for
God.
sure.
Okay, so and then I map onto other people. Like I'm like, okay, so when Roko's talking about this, he's talking about that concept in George MacDonald. For some reason, George MacDonald and I just connect. Like I just know what he's talking about, right?
Hmm.
And that's possibly why I'm you know interested in what he's doing. And then the only way for me to really get what other people are talking about is to refer back to McDonald, and I tend to use pretty, like, in Swiss they say bodenständig. It means floor standing basically. But it's like really down to earth language. Like I don't use a lot of
Hmm.
big
You know
words.
what's really coming to mind suddenly is this I really see a value in um being able to articulate it in common parlance, like
Yeah.
whatever it is you're trying to say, like not having to rely on those philosophical jargon words.
Then Jesus said, "Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear." When he was alone, the 12 and the others around him asked him about the parables. He told them, "The secret of the kingdom of God has been given to you, but to those on the outside everything is in parables, so that they may be ever seeing but never perceiving, and ever hearing but never understanding."
Lord of the Rings is a parable. Parables are good news stories. Therefore, Lord of the Rings is good news. Would you say that
Like a
that's
syllogism.
yeah, the logical syllogism? Would you say that that's a fair description of what you're laying out?
Absolutely.
It's like I do think it's a balance insofar as like some of the new words can be insanely helpful, like
Well,
and
they
I'm sure you'd agree like
yeah,
that certain
totally.
concepts are useful for thinking. Sorry, um, what were you saying there? Like
No, I agree with you. Yeah,
yeah,
certain words are really great. Like, but it took me forever to sort out epistemology and ontology. I had no,
Yeah.
like, I have no relationship to those words at all.
Yeah.
Like, why
It's
don't you just say
basically jargon
knowledge? Why don't you
jargon
just say
and
knowledge and being? Like, what's wrong with those words?
yeah. Yeah.
Why do you have to say epistemology? Huh?
Yeah, it's true. True. And then the problem is that you can't explain it to like just people that,
Your
you know,
neighbor.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You start saying ontology and they're like, gone.
yeah, no, that's actually like that's kind of been the thorn in my back to some extent, which is that like when I kind of first had this big insight, I kind of was reluctant even before I saw the cube or whatever. I was reluctant to even like let myself experience it. It was like I felt this impending sensation even when I was younger. There was a couple times where I was younger, a couple times when I was sick. One time in college, I was drunk. It was really late at night, like
You were
where I had
drunk.
this, yeah, where I had this crazy sense of impending, this like this sense of like something, an impending end or something was coming, like a conclusion or something. But then when I was tripping, like leading up to that experience, it was like there was this thing, but I was reluctant to let myself experience it because I wanted to be able to articulate every step as I went. And of course, like, you know, you can't always do that. Sometimes you just have to let go and experience life, you know, but also like I think there's real value in like tracing your steps and like such that maybe you can relay the path to someone else,
Yeah.
or you know, and then afterwards of course being able to kind of like point to these mystical, you know, experiences or phenomena or whatever with common language. You know, I feel like I'm reluctant to like give up that pursuit or something. I don't know exactly how to phrase what
You
I'm
give
saying.
up the pursuit of tracing your steps or using common language.
Of maintaining my connections with people as well. You
Yeah.
know, it's like if
Yeah.
you know, if you have an experience that puts you in a totally different world, you know, then you're isolated as well, right? So it's kind of like you have to be able to communicate with others and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Some of that's not good though as well because, like I said, the just letting go was uncommon in
Mm.
my own personal psychology, particularly at that time. But
Mhm.
anyway, I don't know. That's kind of just a
An aside.
ramble.
Yeah. An
Yeah,
aside.
talking about epistemological terminology. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've thought about why, because it's not just like it almost feels like a learning disability. Like it really frustrated me when I couldn't, like we would be talking on Girl Country and Nate would be using epistemology and I'd be like looking at him for the umpteenth time because I just couldn't keep it in my head. And so I was like, well, what is wrong with me? Like, why don't I know what that means? But then I thought, well, actually, that's poetry, which I really relate to. Like that's kind of it's my first language, like from a young age. That's what I would do when I wanted to articulate myself. I would sing, even as like a little kid. And I actually remember times when I was really little that I would be sad and I would just sit with a family pet and sing, just sing. That was the only comfort that you know, thinking wasn't probably high on my list of priorities at the age of 4 or whatever,
Mhm.
but I worked things out by singing. And then when I got old enough to, I wrote poetry. And that was always for me, like poetry was always, it wasn't great poetry, but it was my way of unloading emotionally. And poetry it's metaphor, right? So you're taking very simple language and you're putting it together in that chimeric way that we talked about, with Saint Christopher, in order to reveal to someone else or yourself an image, right, of something. And so poetry is just cumbersome if it's using words like epistemology and ontology. You know what I mean? Just like, no, it's unattainable, might as well just. And so anyway, that was my reasoning about why I didn't have any relationship to these conceptual propositional words, although some of them I've learned to use and I appreciate them, now, but epistemology and ontology, they still make me nervous. Whenever I hear them, I'm like, wait, okay, I got it.
I like ontology better. Epistemology is still extra weird to me.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Anytime ontology, I'm just like, all right, these people are trying to, add extra importance to this stuff as like being real.
You know how I remember ontology as being? On.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That's
think
it.
about like,
okay, that's being.
I almost think about like, like it's a world, like it's material, like like a lot of people equate reality with materiality, but obviously this is not a true equation, but nonetheless, to our modern minds, that's kind of where my head goes. Ontology, onto, on is like, oh, I don't know. Yeah. So
we're letting people know. Yeah,
that came up in the context. What?
No, go ahead.
Okay. That came up in the context of the etheric and the astral. That's how we got there.
Yes.
Yeah. And
like, what the hell?
yeah.
Can we just say that some other way,
I am tempted to defend them a little bit though, because
no, do so because it's just my own personal pet peeve.
I mean, I think it's totally understandable, and I'm there with you to a certain extent, because I think it's kind of I don't know what I want to say.
Give me something concrete to throw my hook into. Astral.
Okay, well, this is the thing. Okay. There's so much going through my head. Okay, I need to take a moment.
Yeah, do it.
So I think that it is perhaps a useful framing. However, I don't know if I'm using the terms or if I understand them. It's like you were saying, like as I've been listening, it's kind of like you gotta figure out what they mean by their terms, and it's like I have like what I imagine it means, and then
exactly. Yeah, what does it mean to you, right? Because essentially, like, this whole McDonald idea of getting your meaning across, right? Of letting Saint Christopher, the chimera, carry across meaning. And so it always only means something to you, right? And that's fine. Like, I think that's how it should be.
Yeah. I think at the same time, like, I think there's use in trying to understand what the person speaking about it meant,
Yes.
And it's kind of like a matter of maybe synchronizing those to some extent, like not insofar as you're changing what they meant, but like through your own, I don't know, like Steiner would have said that it's about artistically creating our own representations of things, like such that when we see things, we do create what we see. It goes through our own lens, but in so doing, we're trying to create things that we're trying to create images that reflect what's actually there.
Perhaps another explanation is needed. As individuals, we should, to a certain extent, be the creator of our own representations. Yet, of course, such representations must not be allowed to be our own creation. Why do the images representing the outer world in ordinary life not take an arbitrary course? Because we have to make our inner imagery conform to the outer objects. All arbitrariness of the I, capital I, falls away because the phenomena say what they are. Objects themselves tell us how to think of them. It is not up to the I, capital. Those who will not adjust themselves to the objects have erroneous thoughts, and quickly become aware of how little success they have with the world's phenomena. This necessary human attitude toward the things of the outer world can be designated in cognition by the term selfless. We must become selfless toward phenomena, and the outer world becomes our teacher in that selflessness. It removes from us all illusions, all fantastic notions, all illogical judgments, all non-objectivity. Our I, capital, does not in the least way play an arbitrary role. This selflessness becomes our very own, even when nothing outside compels it. We must learn to create inwardly, because we have to make our inner imagery conform to the outer objects.
And I would say, as I understand it, as I like to think about it,
Yes.
as I think Steiner may have meant by it, however we
Yes.
want to say it,
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
I think the astral would go with spiritual beings that are above us, like angels, and
Yeah, but okay,
I think it goes with.
but
I
then
think
what
it go-
about our what is our astral body?
Yeah,
Is our spiritual body?
I think okay. So as we go up, it gets more. It's a temporal thing, right? So it's increasingly eternal as we go up the hierarchy. So the way we can think about that as formative influences. So like the formative principles that underlie the way things happen.
Mm.
Or like, let's say, like the spirit of materialism or something as a spiritual being. That's kind of a hard example, but let's say maybe pride is a spiritual being, and that you see it through time manifest in patterns, right?
Okay, so I would say I would call that, just so I can get a hook, the gods.
Yeah. Yes, I think that fits, and I think that a way we can think about this as well is astrology. The astral astrology. I guess Steiner perhaps meant that he was using the language just because they're similar in character, such that you have spiritual beings impressing themselves on people, similar to how he understood.
Okay, so you know what I'm thinking about right now? Projection.
My main gripe with the term is that projection is an active process. It's not something which happens involuntarily. You do not accidentally project a reel of film onto a screen.
Projection?
Yeah, because the gods reside in the constellations, in astrology. That's where they are, right? Like we can look up and see the gods.
You're thinking about the actual constellations, or you mean like the planets
I'm talking
in the
about
constellations?
the actual constellations, right? So we have the gods, because every astrological sign pertains to a certain personality trait. So, like, let's say something like that, right? Which would be like a passion.
Yeah, no, I just didn't know if you meant particularly the the signs, or like the planets and the signs as a thing,
I
like
was thinking of the sign. Well, I was thinking of the constellations themselves,
Hmm.
Orion and
it's very
Scorpio
interesting. Yeah.
and the the bear, and you know what we're doing, because this is what human beings do, is we take what's inside and we use creation in order to understand ourselves, right? So we almost act, I think Barfield would shudder at the moment if I say this out loud, but I'll say it anyway. We almost act like a movie camera, right? Where we take all the passions and we just imagine showing a film on a blank canvas, and it's the constellations, and the constellations are us. Like the constellations actually reside right inside of us.
Yes,
Does that make any sense?
yes, no, 100%. This is what Jung thought. This is what Peterson raves about when he used to talk about astrology more.
Because the night sky was completely unknown, people could project their fantasies into it, and that's what they did with astrology. So astrology is this cumulative fantasy that's going on in the roughly speaking, in the deep unconscious, projected onto the sky. And so if you analyze old astrological writings, what you're really doing is analyzing old fantasies, and because of that you could develop some insight into the structure of the mind. And so he did the same thing with alchemy.
And this is what this is what a lot of people would say.
To identify this meaningless shape as a cartoon clown. And it is the same process which caused ancient humanity to see gods and monsters in the stars. It is a mistake, I think, to regard these as utter illusions. It isn't technically wrong to call them hallucinations, nor is it technically wrong to say that calling this a book is a hallucination. In the first place, it's just a photograph.
And I think there's a lot of truth to that. The idea that astrology works because of the projective faculty. However, I've also been thinking a lot recently about a more quote unquote objective nature to astrology.
Yes.
In a sense where
I think that's true too. Like, I don't want to diminish it because projection has a pejorative tone to it, right? Oh, you're just projecting your shit onto me or whatever. I don't mean it in those terms. It's a macrocosm, right?
Yeah.
Like in the words of Joni Mitchell, we are stardust.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
right?
Yeah. And that's, yeah, I've been thinking about it through the idea that maybe there is, so these higher levels, they are like what condition the possibilities below. I'm staring at this image here and I'm hesitating for various reasons, but I think that I just want to show it to you, which is
show me it.
Which is this image that I just cooked up today when I was kind of struck by a wave of these various interrelatings. Can you see this?
That's great. Yes, this is perfect.
So this is.
Hey, so why are we talking about this when you just cooked this up today? That is hilarious.
Well, various reasons. One of them is that this is Galahad's image, and this is all very speculative, and this is very loose. And this is his image to do with constellation, and he's mentioned before how it was suggested that this top section would be the faculty of constellation, almost like a technique or a technology. And there's more context in the video I recently posted called I retitled it to the Aquarian dichotomy, talking about technology and why are we talking about technology. And that's connected with the New Jerusalem being a technical thing.
Certain things that used to be unconsciously self-regulating aren't anymore because the environment has changed so dramatically.
And then, but he also kind of suggested that maybe there would be, other aspects, kind of other faculties or techniques or something like that. And I can't help but think about these kind of layers of the human being. Again, it's very speculative, but basically the ones that I'm really seeing a mapping to is the astral being basically like spiritual beings that we see in psychology and also in astrology.
Mm.
And then the etheric would be more like morphogenetic fields or temporal patterns or like
Right.
collective bodies. And then constellation would be interfacing with like teleological objects directly or something. Like an interesting thing about astrology that you can think about it is that I'm going to stop sharing is that you can think about it almost like the star is up here and it's casting a shadow
Hmm.
onto the earth almost, and that shadow does not cause things to happen in a particular way, but it's basically mirroring the fact that the way that things unfold has been constrained to certain possibilities. So like if you have a Jupiter Mars conjunction, this would maybe reflect something about the types of things that can happen or something like that, you know? Or like if we live in a particularly reductionistic, materialistic, left-brainism time, it's almost like that spirit is hovering above us and kind of
Constraining.
casting a shadow, yeah, constraining. And but then the etheric would be more about like like plants have that as well, where it's about like morphogenetic stuff. But I don't know. Again, this is super speculative. And
What is
basically
morphogenetic?
that's Rupert Sheldrake's stuff. So that's like
The etheric body of the seed includes the tree, so it includes more possibilities, right? It
Is that transformable?
yeah, it would also be in time. So it's like
We still clearly experience our participation in the etheric life of the earth, which has a distinct and separate character according to the various seasons. The etheric body still bears within it the echoes of what was experienced in the past. The physical body is essentially a body in space, and the etheric body a temporal being.
I think about like when Christ reappeared after he was in his resurrection body. I kind of imagine that as an etheric body.
Mhm.
And I also kind of think about that as like a formative principle that people can experience in their mind. Like he kind of ascended to this place where he has this formative like he created this time process which is happening leading to this future event, and we can ascertain this temporal conditioning thing that's active in time or something like that.
And so once we move through the physical surface of a human being, for example, we begin to look through that veneer. That's when we can begin to see the etheric body, the astral body, the spaces of possibility, the formative structures which preclude the particularities of physical manifestations. And we do that through imagination.
Like we can see, I don't know, I'm really struggling to articulate this, but it's also speculative.
This ability will enable human beings to see in their surroundings something of the etheric world, which up to now they have not normally been able to perceive. The human being now sees only man's physical body. Then, however, he will be able to see the etheric body, at least as a shadowy image, and also to experience the relationship of all deeper events in the etheric. And who is bound up with this fact? That being whom we call the Christ.
That is, the idea that self-sacrifice is the structure of being isn't just like a nice, hopeful thing that we're saying. It's that, if the world is made out of a fractal and that all things have to participate in their higher purposes, there has to be a self-giving that's part of the structure. It can't just be either top-down, authority or, a kind of equality at the bottom. And the idea that that which is at the highest is giving itself up and giving itself down, like in love, towards that which constitute it, that is actually revealing how the world functions. There's a coherence of goods that can be seen. The way that he brings it together is basically the origin of how we see the world as a coherent order that lays itself out from, we don't say from heaven anymore, but let's say from mathematics, you could say, all the way down into all the smallest phenomena.
He will never come again in a physical body. That event was unique. The Christ will return, however, in an etheric form in the period of which we have been speaking. Then human beings will learn to perceive Christ, because through this etheric vision they will grow upward toward Him who no longer descends as far as into a physical body, but only into an etheric body. It will therefore be necessary for human beings to grow upward to a perception of Christ. For Christ spoke truly when He said, quote, "I am with you always, even unto the end of the earth." Unquote. He is here. He is in our spiritual world. And those who are especially blessed can perceive Him always in this spiritual etheric world. St. Paul was convinced through such perception in the event of Damascus.
And then one more thing is that if the astral is the angels and the planets and stuff, I also think there's an important reference to, I guess, St. Paul, who would be that we shall judge the angels and we shall rule over the angels, which is that I actually think that by appropriately relating to astrology, we kind of transcend it to a certain extent, where it no longer rules us unconsciously. It's a technology and it's like a faculty and it's a aspect of reality that right now we are just kind of unconsciously swirling in. Once we do that, then you shall become as gods and like pillars standing above like stars, like just like Steiner said, the eye is above the astral body. This is all said. And what I think that means is like, we become the principles that, we are no longer, I'm trying to avoid some extremely like Gnostic, overly freedom oriented language, but it's like true freedom, some sort of true freedom of like, we've kind of discussed it before, of not being dragged along, and there's a divine cosmic order. And then like the idea would be to dance with it in a productive and intentional, way. But also in those instances, like I think that's when we line up with the pattern of reality. We are in a story, we live in a story, and then we become as a standard by which other people can kind of orient themselves around, kind of similar to how we do with the stars.
Jonathan, there's like 3 synchronicities for me. Like talking about the angels, that we will judge the angels, right? In that 9th elegy, Rilke says, tell the angels, tell them about the things. Don't tell them about the unsayable, or which is the ineffable, right? Because he's way bigger than you are, and you're a novice, and those things aren't interesting to him. Tell him about the things that you have that are closest to you, that you can touch, right? And I thought about that, and I thought, okay, well, what is that? That is wonder. And so, and then he says, and he will be astounded. Okay, because he can, in a sense, live vicariously through you, right? He can experience your wonder as you tell him about the things. And so this is how we actually judge them, because they don't have that. They don't have that kind of wonder at their world. They're not children. Like he says, don't tell them about the unsayable. Don't tell them about the ineffable, the thing that you can't talk about, because they already know that, right? Tell them about the things closest to you. And then he uses the examples of like when you stood beside the rope maker in Rome, right? And you watched. It's called Duino Elegies. So there's 10 elegies. And in each one of them, he's talking with or about or of angels.
Gotcha.
When the traveler returns from the mountain slopes into the valley, he brings not a handful of earth, unsayable to others, but instead some word he has gained, some pure word, the yellow and blue gentian, which is a flower. Because he's a poet, he's saying that the flower is a word. Oh, to say them more intensely than the things themselves ever dreamed of existing. He says, speak and bear witness that the things look to us for deliverance. This is what eurythmy is, right? Eurythmy is saying the sayable. When you are astounding an angel, you are above him. You are having an experience of something that he is not having and cannot have.
This connects to a thing I think at the crucifixion they said the sun went dark, and the traditional way of saying that is that the sun turned his face because he couldn't bear to look, and that's kind of what came to mind when you were just saying that, because Christ
Okay,
was
so
above Christ was
here
above the sun in that moment, like he, like metaphysically speaking, like in terms of
right.
you know
So we have a saying, out of the mouths of babes. And that usually belongs to a situation where a child will say something that cuts right to the chase of the matter. That's a judgment on the part of the child. And what the child does is he's saying the sayable. He's saying the things. He's talking about the things, right? Because the child lives in wonder. And so it's very much, that's what Rilke's talking about when he's talking about tell the angel about the things that are closest to you that you can touch, right? Because you will astound him with those, because he can only live vicariously through your wonder. He can wonder at your wonder, right? It's unattainable to him, what your wonder, okay?
Yeah, isn't
And
it like there's like, the angels weep for want of embodiment, like,
there
right?
you
That
go.
they, like, that the human is really where it's at. It's like,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. And that embodiment, like, and this is what Rilke's doing, is he's bringing you down into that mineral body, right? Into that physical body that goes up the mountain and comes down with the flower. And that flower is the word. It's your word that you bring back from the
the
mountain.
logos.
Well, it's your word because it's an actual thing, right? And that's what our words are. And that's what he says previously when he says, maybe we're only here to say house, fig tree, tower, right? And I also think it's what this little corner is doing. Like, this is sacred magic, right? When we say the things that, like, when we take from our heaven and we make and we breathe, George MacDonald would say, that's when you're speaking from the spirit and not from the flesh, right? When you're taking the names of things and you're perceiving your world and articulating them. It's what Barfield, Steiner, Heidegger, it's what all of them were wrestling with. And it's this ability that human beings have to metaphorically understand who they are. And who they are is the microcosm of them, right? But it's like George MacDonald says, the world is the human being turned inside out. That's what I meant by projection, right? So like we look out and it's us we see, right? It's us we need to, it's this other universe inside of us that we're trying to
Yes.
articulate. Yeah, go.
Yes. Okay. Yes. No, I think that's beautiful. And so that Formscapes guy who I've mentioned to you just put out a video in which he was talking about this, how Steiner was talking about how the cosmos is the human being turned inside out. So
Steiner said that?
yeah. And
Interesting.
So again, you've got this kind of nested layers type of thing going on. And so what Steiner is saying then, in saying that the human being is turned inside out, what he means is that these more outer layers of our being are actually closer to the core ontologically. Your astral body, in a sense, is more inner in the sense that it is closer to the fundamental nature of your existence than the physical body.
And how the physical body is actually kind of the most superficial
expression of your being.
Mm-hmm.
And that the further out dimensions are actually more core to who we are.
In the sense that they're more fundamental ontologically.
And this is an interesting thing about maybe like your birth chart being your astral body, perhaps. This is a suggestion that I'm inclined to suggest. I'm not sure about it, but such that it's kind of this
bigger, as it were,
this temporal thing that's like has this long being. It's not just like it influences you through your whole life.
It has duration.
Yeah. And but then even beyond that, like I don't know, it gets interesting thinking about like the galaxy maybe being like closer to your true identity, and then ultimately the universe, like you are the universe. And
it suggests that black holes around the universe sort of act like these giant observer eyes, potentially causing the universe to create reality that we know. Or the horizon from various black holes is responsible for creating physical objects and for collapsing quantum effects. And although that's an intriguing proposition, they actually go a little bit further in their recent study. In this case, realizing that these types of horizons, where nothing can actually escape, and things crossing the horizon sort of start violating certain quantum principles, may also exist elsewhere in the universe. As a matter of fact, the edge of the universe. Because in this case, pretty much in a sphere around us, there's this hypothetical idea known as the edge of the observable universe. Physically, we can actually never reach it, but hypothetically, the sphere around us, with a radius of approximately 45 billion light years away from planet Earth, represents the observable universe. But right at the edge, because of the expansion of the universe, things are expanding faster than light. Or in other words, right at the edge right here, that's another event horizon. Sort of like the inverse of the black hole. And the idea here is that these horizons around us produce very similar decoherence of quantum states. Or the edge of the universe that's around us causes all of these everything bagels in the universe to become something else. Maybe a sesame seed bagel. Or to rephrase this even more, the edge of the universe acts as a kind of an observer of everything inside of it, especially at the center. And so even though this sort of resembles an eyeball, it sort of acts like one, observing everything in the middle and causing quantum particles to assume shape, to assume properties, and to create objects, or to create the reality we know. And by itself, this does sound somewhat metaphysical, and erroneously can start bringing in the idea of, for example, religion. Does that mean that this is basically God? Well, according to the scientists, it's really quite the opposite.
I don't know, but it's exciting to me because I really feel like there's something here that like is helping. I don't know, it's just like coherent, but
yeah,
I don't know. But yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking about recently with regard to the astral and the etheric. So that would hopefully that gives you something to
yeah.
And I think the psychologists are studying kind of the astral dimension. Maybe the biologists are studying the material and the etheric or something. I don't know. Yeah.
So when I watched that, like I got about halfway through that conversation with Matt Segall. Is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
Dr. Matthew D. Segall.
And he talked about like Goethe, I can totally relate to. And it was so funny because he said something about Goethe imagining, first of all, he talked about the etheric as the body of the plant, right?
Yeah.
And
The Ungrund or the Ur phenomenon, those are two different.
Phänomen, yeah, and Ur in German, it's a great word because it's only 2 letters, U and R. It sounds super ancient, and it is. It actually means origin.
Isn't
Ur.
there a place called, wasn't Ur like one of the first cities, right? The city of Ur?
I don't know.
I'm
No,
pretty sure it was.
was it Uz?
I'm
I
pretty
don't
sure there was
remember.
a place called Ur, or maybe it was ER.
I don't know.
The ancient Sumerian city of Ur was one of the most significant and prosperous cities in ancient Mesopotamia, and one of the first true cities in history. Located in what's now southern Iraq, it emerged around 3800 BCE and flourished during the Sumerian period as the capital of the ancient Sumerian kings. Ur's strategic location near the Euphrates River and its fertile surroundings contributed to its economic success as a center of trade and agriculture for centuries. Ur was also home to a massive ziggurat built over 4,000 years ago in 2100 BCE by King Ur-Nammu, dedicated to the moon god Nana, the patron deity of the city. Excavations reveal that Ur had impressive architecture and intricate artwork showcasing the advanced civilization of the Sumerians. Although the city experienced periods of decline and invasion, it remained an essential center of Mesopotamian culture and trade for thousands of years. The sheer scale of time the city existed saw it get damaged and rebuilt and expanded over repeatedly. And it came under the control of some of the most notable empires of antiquity, including the Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians.
But anyway, so Ur is origin, right? And so what Goethe is looking at, oh geez, a little mouse just went down a hole outside, not in my house. An Ur phenomenon is an origin phenomenon.
Yeah.
Is basically the translation for that. And so like if he saw a plant in one country and then he went down, like he talked about him going to Italy and seeing the same plant, but it was slightly different because it had a different environment to grow in, and it was contending with different opponent processing.
But you could still see the same Ur phenomenon.
But you could see the origin plant in it, right?
Yeah, or like the basic
so
kind of basic formative like principle or something like that,
right.
Temporal way.
One of the things that struck me was that he said Goethe was able to imagine, like the reason he could see those things, he could see the etheric, like what Steiner would call the etheric in the plant, the Urphänomen, right? He could see that because he could, as Desmet would say, empathically resonate with the plant.
And there's imagination involved as well. You have to imagine.
And imagination. Yeah. So he had to imagine, right? And here's the thing: when I read The Metamorphosis of Plants by Goethe, and like I don't know much about Goethe, okay, but I read The Metamorphosis of Plants and what it was that he was doing, and I imagined being Goethe, and I understood exactly what he saw. I was right there. Like that's how it felt to me. And that's why I was like, I could imagine his eye tracing, and I've talked about this before, tracing the boundaries of the limitations of the plant and not imposing himself on them, not cutting into them, not cutting them open, not tearing them apart, but letting the plant exist, not ripping it out of the ground, not dissecting it, right? But letting it be and just laying there and staring at it. And that's how he figured out that the leaf becomes the flower. Right? And so...
Yeah, and that's how I figure out that you become the eschatological Shari. I imagine, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
it's all tied up in the imagination.
Yeah. And this thing about the images, I think, and like do we use our eyes and stuff, like, yeah, it's not that you see the etheric, but without your eyes, like it would be a different experience of seeing the etheric, right? Because you would be going off your, whatever it's like to be a blind person imagining, but.
Well, this is, yeah, okay, but I think there's an interesting point to be made about that, because Meister Eckhart talks about the deception that we undergo on a regular basis, because we think that what we're looking at, our eyes deceive us, right? So he talks about our physical eyes as our old eyes, and that if we really want to see the world, we have to see it with spiritual eyes. And then
I think that spiritual eyes are in your regular eyes, though, such that like you have both, and like if you have to use your eyes.
Which is exactly what Goethe was doing, right?
Yeah.
He was doing that. But that requires a disassociation from all of your passions, Jonathan. Right?
But it doesn't require a disassociation from the images. It requires a deepening relationship with the images.
Right. But in order for Goethe to come to the conclusion that he came to about the plant, he had to withdraw himself from it. He couldn't impose himself on it.
Such representations must not be allowed to be our own creation.
Right?
I think about that as like agape,
exactly.
And that's a participation in it, but it's also a not imposing,
Right.
It's also a kind of a chaste virginal seeing.
Yes, it is.
But it still involves,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a participation in the form of a withdrawal, so that the other thing can unfold itself before you, right?
Yeah.
And I always like to think of it as teaching a kid to ride a bicycle. You hold on and hold on and hold on until you think they're ready, and then you let go. And they're terrified. They don't want you to let go. But in order for them to realize that they can actually ride the bicycle, you have to let go. That's agape.
Yeah.
Right? You have to withdraw from them.
I like that. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. I think we found a beautiful paradox here.
Oh yeah.
It's growing with the plant as you look at it. It's an imaginal seeing into and like deeply abiding with. But at the same time, there is I really like this idea of respect being spelled with a capital S, respect, because then it's like respectate. It's like to look again. To respect something is to step back and to look again.
Yes, that's beautiful. Love that. That's really good. That's really good. I just know this really well from interacting or living with my farm animals. The more that I don't withdraw from them, the more at risk they are for actually death. So I've had some chickens that for some reason or other, they just want to be my friend. I can't figure it out. So I show up at the chicken coop, everybody else is running away, but they run up to me and they fly up and they sit next to me and they want to eat out of my hand. And, they just get it in their heads. For some reason they bond, and I don't know what happened, because I don't try to, I'm not trying to be friends with, I'm nice to my chickens and I love them, but I'm not like taming them. But I always know that
they're so funny when they run over too. They're like,
but I always know that if any of them are going to go first, it's them. It's the ones that aren't paying attention, that have too much security. Right? They think that they always think they're safe. And that's why they approach me at the way that they do, because they don't have that kind of respect. Right? And so when something dangerous comes around, they're not going to just act from their limbic system. They're going to think, oh, that's interesting. Maybe it's nice. Maybe it has food. And boom, they're gone, right? They're always gone first, Jonathan. Always.
Well, I want to challenge your analogy a little bit.
Go for it.
which is, imagine we are the chickens. I suppose God is not a farmer, right? It's a different type of relationship.
I don't know. Jesus was a gardener.
You know, like we are the sheep.
He is
And
the shepherd.
yeah, and
And
like so
Mary,
if we overly bond with the shepherd though, I don't think that's really an issue, right? These are
that's a
different.
different relationship.
Yeah, different.
Sheep and shepherd are totally different.
That's true.
That's a whole other story. And that's because the sheep is so different than most animals, actually.
Interesting.
A lot of people think sheep are dumb because they panic and they run, and they run off cliffs, or they whatever, they just do, but this one guy, well, he's my sheep shearer, actually. He's an old guy, and he had a 300 sheep ranch for years. And he said to me, sheep are not dumb, sheep are clever. And the interesting word about clever is, or the interesting thing about the word that he chose, was that clever, for me anyways, it indicates a kind of a reasoning. There's an ability to reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I've been learning about my sheep over the years, like, because I didn't have sheep before. I had goats. And the one thing about the sheep is that they know the shepherd, for one thing. So they will interact with me, but they won't interact with my husband. They won't interact with strangers. They won't even come near strangers. Like, I had a group of people here once that wanted to see the sheep, and I took them out. The sheep just buggered off as soon as they saw them, because they're all strangers, right? So they do have ways of, anyways, sheep are just different.
Yeah, I didn't mean to push back too hard. It's more so because I found your first analogy with the chickens compelling, but I was like, how do I balance this?
Yeah, you balance it with sheep and goats. That's the difference.
Yeah.
That's what the Bible does. The Bible talks about human beings as sheep and goats, right? So the sheep know the voice of the shepherd. They're clever. They can reason, and they do. I mean, and there's also a love. There's a weird love between sheep and the shepherd. Like, the sheep, they would stop eating. They will stop eating. They will stand in bad weather. They will fall into your eyes. There's this weird thing that happens with sheep. It's almost painful, the way that they look into my eyes sometimes with that much love, right?
Did you get to the part of my conversation with Kevin where I clipped the conversation from Grail Country where they were talking about the wounding gaze of Christ?
I did see that.
Christ himself is pierced, but then there's his piercing gaze, like the way in which his look affects those he looks upon. And I'm interested in what we make of that.
I can't help but think about that, when you're talking about the sheep, right? It's like, that is so fascinating to me. Because that's what I think about when I think about the sword, of bearing the sword of Revelation. I think about that, one thing we can think about that is the word of God. As we've discussed, I think that we're always speaking. So I think about that loving gaze. That is the sword of truth. And
yes,
and that can really pierce people, but it's a love, it's a love. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. And I think that that's the violence in a way that we're called to. And it's not really that violent, but it also is like a real, like, even, and we can even get it from sheep, right? But, imagine a human looked at you with that real depth, not just like they put on the right face, but like it was really as deep as that sheep, but also a human. It's like, I think that is what we are called to. That's what I think is up, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I had that experience with.
Yeah, I think everyone's I dare contest that everyone's most powerful experience was in an eye contact situation. Like maybe that's not true, but I don't think it's a crazy suggestion.
Yeah. Well, there's to me, that's always like, and I've talked about this in connection with training horses and stuff. This is when your consciousness touches another consciousness, right? Like, so it's beyond, it's behind the veil. You're behind the veil when that happens.
Yeah. Maybe I'm over eager and like biting off more than I can chew, but I think there's a way where like that veil can become no more. Like where I realize that there is a kind of an idolatrous danger in like getting stuck at the physical level, and like the images and not, like not seeing through the images. But I think that there's a way where the image can actually image forth what is behind it, like,
of course.
And I think that's what Steiner was trying to point out with the eurythmy, but I don't know if I really am with his framing of it. But yeah, I think that, like, I think there are moments where, like we actually physically appear differently or something. I don't know how to put it.
Bearing this in mind, let us look into the countenance of a person. As far as we depend on our senses, the image we perceive is of course correct. We cannot be mistaken, since we are dealing with a sense impression. Now the intellect enters the picture, and does so subconsciously. We are confronted immediately with a classic example of erroneous judgment. For how does the mind conceive the human countenance in relation to the forces that formed it? It thinks of it as having been shaped from outside, whereas the face is really the product of the sentient soul working outward from within. We judge incorrectly when we look into a person's countenance and say that it is actually material body. We must say instead that what the senses perceive here is the outer image of the sentient soul, the soul itself, and that soul works outward from within. You have reached the correct conclusion when you view the human face as soul. Let me read that sentence again. You have reached the correct conclusion when you view the human face as soul. You look at a human face that is the picture of a soul. And while looking at this picture of the soul, of course it is only an image, you think of it as corporeal. That view is totally mistaken and demonstrates how wrongly we interpret things as soon as we call on our power of judgment. We form correct views of external images only if we understand them correctly, if we speak of the human countenance as an, quote, image of the soul, unquote, and recognize the mistake in trying to explain it only on the basis of the physical and etheric forces. This human countenance must be explained out of the forces of the soul itself. The visible is explained in terms of the invisible in this case.
Like the sparkle, the shine, glory, the glory of God. And it's
a mark of their holiness with a halo, with gold, and all of this is the same. It's the peeking into the totality of their being in the eschaton. It's the capacity we have already to be in that moment and to participate in it. A halo is the glory. It's the glory of the person.
It is the legitimacy. It is the rulership, the authority from above.
It's kind of a patterned shining. It's not like we literally a color change or something. I don't know. I kind of still hold out the idea that maybe when Christ was transfigured that there was actual light, like
actual, for sure.
Like,
I mean, this is what in the Orthodox Church they call it the light of Tabor, and it's the uncreated light. And there's a tradition in Orthodox monasticism called hesychasm, where the monks come into a deep, contemplative state and can glow with the light of Tabor, with the uncreated light. Hang on a second. I think we're having internet conflictions here. Hang on.
Yeah.
Think of it as a circle of light, or it's a visual sign, of that person's holiness. And it came from pagan times, and then finally only for the saints.
Divine authorization and legitimacy of power from above.
Okay. Are you there? I'm gonna have to sign off, unfortunately.
That's fine. That was
Yeah,
probably a good
because
spot anyway.
we're competing with each other, and
That's all good. I'd rather you not
yeah.
compete with your husband. Yeah. The one last thing I'll say is that the way I kind of frame it is that this thing that this is a faculty that we already possess, but right
Yeah.
now, and it's like English. It's just another language, basically, but we use it unconsciously, and we don't know what
Yes.
we're doing with it. and some people do kind of figure out that it's an actual thing that they're doing, and then you can use it to hide yourself. And I think basically all people go through this when they become teenagers or whatever. But there's another stage calling us, and that's where we reconnect to that Edenic childlike state, and that comes through an integration of the unconscious technology, in my opinion. And I think that's what we're called to do in this time period. I think we're called to learn how to speak with our spirit and through our body or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're taking something unconscious and you're making it conscious. You're incorporating something pre-conscious, as it were, into your ego, such that it becomes a kind of instrument of the ego, or you feel yourself to be that part of you rather than feeling like it's something that's happening to you, right?
And one must understand that not only what is said, but also what is done will bring things to expression, and that in these things the universal logos lives in a certain way.
That's really the key to all of this. That's the next stage that we're moving through right now.
To a great extent, words have lost their meaning, by which I mean the living soul connection of the word with the reality that underlies the word. Words have become mere abbreviations, and the intoxication in which many people live with regard to words is no longer genuine ecstasy, because only a deepening as regards the spiritual world can make genuine the words we speak. Words will only regain real content when human beings fill themselves with knowledge of the spiritual world.
It's basically to participate with the creative happening, the creative being, the creative ongoing genesis, which is occurring, and in all of our language, and just to parade our being with the creative work of God.
We have brought about a certain attentiveness to what we actually want in the gesture.
I think the reason we need the wounding gaze is that it's part of what helps give us a real face and shatters our masks.
Yes, that's. I will write that down and not give you credit for it.
No problem. Steal away.
The secret of Western languages is that the physical tone as such is losing its importance, while the spiritual element gains in importance. It is part and parcel of these people's task to let spirit infuse language, not only to hear physically, but to intuit, to feel and sense more than is actually contained in the sounds of speech. In the West, therefore, it will be necessary to seek the spirit through language itself.
Yeah.
That's what I have to say.
Yeah, like George MacDonald says, is speaking. Yeah.
And also to see it.
Yeah,
and also to read the language. That's It's lagging now. Okay. Signing off. It was laggy.
Okay.
It was laggy.
You were totally frozen for me. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Bye, Jonathan.